Hey guys, Vlad here with AVT-Astro, and today I want to talk about a pretty interesting topic, and that is buying a used telescope. So if you watch any of my other videos, I usually kind of, intro by saying that I've owned over 100 different scopes, and you might wonder, well, hey, maybe Vlad is friends with Elon Musk, or perhaps he's a relative, and Elon Musk, sends him $1 billion every so often to buy 100 telescopes. Yeah, unfortunately that is not the case. So, the reason that I've had over 100 scopes is I just love trying out equipment. That's kind of what inspired my little blog, AVT-Astro, and, like now this YouTube channel. I just like trying out equipment, and the way that I get most of my stuff is by buying a used. I've bought a few scopes over the years brand new, but, I just can't afford to take the depreciation hit by buying stuff, brand new. So, I guess, if you watch any of my other videos, you might kind of have caught on to the fact that, I'm a pretty humble guy in general. But, as far as like buying used Astro equipment, I think I could fairly, state that I'm an expert in the field, basically, because I've just done it so much. So anyhow, yeah, let's take a look at what you should be looking for when buying a used telescope, whether it be online or in person. Alright, while I'm still sitting on the chair, we'll just start with the online portion of, buying a telescope. Like, what kind of stuff should you look for, where you should buy a scope online, that type of deal. I mean, a couple of pretty popular places online, where you could buy a used scope. Cloudy Nights is one of them, Astromart is another one. eBay is another one. Those are like probably the three most popular ones. I mean, obviously, there's probably a gazillion different other places, but those are like, kind of the mainstream ones. It's not too much different buying a scope online, compared to like, a lot of other items. I mean, the tips that I could give you for buying stuff online is, especially if you're newer to astronomy, you're not really familiar with the equipment, you don't really know what kind of questions to ask, like what to expect of the condition of the item. I would really, tend to stick to those sellers that have like, like a lot of feedback, they know what they're talking about, they know their equipment. Just in general, just use common sense. I mean, if a seller posts, an item with a bunch of pictures, all the pictures are detailed, everything looks in great shape, chances are you're probably pretty safe. Unfortunately, just like with anything, there are, like a decent amount of scams out there, like on, whether it be Astromart or eBay or, Cloudy Nights. So you do kind of have to look out for that. I mean, if you're buying a high dollar item, and obviously that varies from person to person, what's high dollar. I mean, to me, it's probably something that's, let's say, like over $1,000. Usually, I'll ask a lot of questions from the seller about the condition, whether there's any scratches, dents, if it had, if optics are involved, if there's any imperfections on the optics. If you're kind of not sure, like, with the feedback that you're getting from the seller, ask them to send you more pictures. A lot of times if I'm buying something really, expensive, like telescope-wise online, what I actually do is I actually ask the seller to actually give me a phone call, and honestly, you could learn a lot from a phone call. Now, I know it's kind of old-fashioned. A lot of people, they don't really like to call because, we're all used to texting and doing our Facebook, deal, that type of deal thing. But you could just learn a lot from the seller, first of all, whether they're legitimate, whether they know about the equipment, they know about the conditions. So just, kind of giving them a call and just talking to them will give you a lot more insight than, just doing like the messenger deal. Alright, so now that we kind of talked about, online type of, purchase or whatever, what should you look for when you're actually, if you're there and you're looking at the equipment in person? I'm going to go through like some of the more common telescope designs and just kind of talk about specifically what you should look for, with each one. Kind of more in depth with the optics. So yeah, let's start with the Dobsonian. Pretty common design. Chances are if you're buying one of these used, it probably is going to be local. Not very many people ship these unless, they're like a really high-end one or something like that. So yeah, let's take a look at a Dob. Alright, so this is my Dob right now. This is a 10-inch Coulter. So, with the Dob, they're probably the easiest thing to judge, the condition. I mean, this thing is made out of, I think, like, particle board or whatever, So it's, probably not going to have dents. A lot of these will be made out of metal, as far as the tube goes. So, like, if the thing is, the condition of the tube on these, it's not going to affect the performance at all. So, if there's a few dents on the scratches, like, if you care about that, then that might sway your opinion one way or the other, whether you want to buy it or not. But yeah, I mean, like, if as long as you're satisfied with the physical condition of it, then that's great. Otherwise, I mean, just make sure that the mount is smooth. Just kind of move it around. If it moves smoothly, then you're probably good to go. Pretty important thing, focuser wise, so like this Coulter has a pretty cheesy entry level, like really rough feeling 1.25" focuser. Which, that this was common for this, scope, back in the day and age when it was sold. So, make sure that the focuser is smooth. I mean, like, a lot of times, you could just kind of, and this is true about any telescope, but, make sure that it's not, like, slipping when you pull on the draw tube. Yeah, so that. The most important thing on the on the Dobsonian type of telescope is to make sure that the mirrors are in good shape. So basically, you'd want to look at the secondary mirror, make sure there's no scratches, leaks, or anything like that. And then you'd want to make sure that you look at the primary mirror. Oh no, the primary mirror's not in there. Okay, so, obviously, if you saw that and, the seller did not have the mirror, you'd be in trouble. So, do make sure that the mirror's in there. But basically, so this mirror, I have, it's actually in a separate little box. And actually, I wanted to show you this. This is kind of going to segue into the other telescope designs. For what you want to look for in the actual optics, as far as, is there any damage on them, and that type of deal. So let's take a look at this thing and see if this, how well this, oh yeah, okay, so this is showing up pretty well. Okay, so this Coulter, it is not a new telescope. This thing is probably like 40 years old or so, roughly. So, as you can see, this is showing up actually pretty well on camera. This mirror has some sleeks on it. So by sleeks, usually refers to these kind of fine scratches. These are probably there from somebody cleaning this at some point over the last 40 years, pretty improperly. And yeah, it actually essentially damaged the silver coating on the mirror. Now, so I say damaged. Like, this is not desirable at all, so, I'm not trying to say that this is desirable by any stretch of the imagination. Will it affect the view? Probably not. I mean, if it's like an entry-level scope like this, then, if I was buying this thing and it only cost like, $300-400, it's probably not a deal breaker or anything like that. Now, if you're dealing with a more premium type of scope, you're spending, thousands of dollars. Yeah, this is probably something that would I'd really be kind of apprehensive about dealing with, just because I mean, part of a telescope is having pretty much perfect optics, and this when you see this, that's definitely not desirable. Okay, so the other thing on the mirror to look for, sometimes if it's an older mirror, they'll actually have like little black spots on it, and that's the actual coatings just failing. So you do want to look out for that. Obviously look over the edge of the mirror, make sure that there's no chips or anything like that, because that can happen from handling them. This one's actually in really nice shape. In fact, this mirror, if it was recoated, it'd probably be perfect again. So yeah. I mean, for the age, this is not a bad mirror, and actually the coatings are actually still, I mean, besides those sleeks, are in pretty good shape. Now, so everything that I just talked about, as far as this, you'd want to check over on both refractors and SCTs as well, or like a Mac as well. So let's take a look at those scopes now. Alright, moving on to my favorite telescope design. Just kidding, it's not really my favorite, but I do like them. The Sct Telescope. So this is the Nexstar 8SE. a very popular scope. So you know, I mean, you might be looking, you know, like at this model, you know, pretty likely. So what do you look for on these things? You know, basically just overall condition. Again, like if the tube has some scratches, dings on it, you know, that's just kind of cosmetic. That's really not going to affect the performance of the thing at all. So you know, that's kind of like your discretion. You know, like kind of, I guess, what you could tolerate. So the first thing, you know, like one of the first things that I usually do is I'll run the focuser. This should feel very smooth. So if it doesn't feel smooth, you know, maybe, you know, there's something internally that's wrong, so this should turn like very smoothly. On these Celestrons, a lot of times though, what will happen is this little knob, it's just a rubber piece that kind of is, you know, on the metal rod there. It'll actually like kind of rub against the tube here. So, you know, if it's kind of feeling smooth, like it's catching on something, you might want to pull this back, you know, slightly and see if that'll, you know, kind of loosen it up. But yeah, the focuser should be smooth. Should not be coarse, especially on these newer scopes. Or, you know, there's really no reason for it to be coarse. That's, you know, one thing that I would check. And actually, when you're checking when you're turning the focuser too, see that, you know, make sure that the mirror, the primary mirror, this big mirror back there, you know, it's actually moving back and forth. I mean, it's a slow movement, but you should see it moving when you turn up. So optics wise, so I've got all the lights on my camera, and I'm moving it around, right? And so as you can see, we're catching some dust here. You know, a lot of times I'm talking to people, whether, you know, like when I used to be pre-pandemic volunteer at the telescope workshop where we kind of fix scopes, or, you know, like I'm dealing with somebody that's got a scope or whatever, or like, you know, like maybe they're looking at one of my scopes. They'll see dust on the, you know, like on the corrector plate like this, and they kind of freak out. They're like, "Oh my goodness, you know, it's dirty." You know, a little bit of dust like this is absolutely normal. I mean, think about it. You're using the thing outside. You know, you're not in a clean room, so if you're, you know, if you're used to working in a clean room, yeah, this probably looks pretty dirty or whatever. You know, you could buy a brand new scope, use it for a week, and it'll look like this. So this is really not bad. It's easily, you know, if you really wanted to, you could clean it off. Actually, if you probably took a bulb and, you know, blew it off. So this is not bad at all. Some issues that you can have with an SCT, though, with the corrector plate, because these are coated. You know, it's got the XLT coatings. Well, it says that on the tube somewhere. But anyway, these things are coated. So you want to make sure that there isn't like what looks like blotches of coatings missing. If, you know, if it's got that going on, that's, you know, that's not good. And, you know, that will definitely affect the performance of the scope, and it certainly affects its value. So check for that. Again, check for those sleeks like we saw on the mirror of that Coulter. You know, you do not want that. That probably means that it's been cleaned improperly. The corrector plates on these, they're more durable, so, you know, chances are you're probably not going to have that, but, you know, do check for that. Look at the primary mirror, so that's that big mirror in the back there. You know, same thing, make sure that there's no, like, mold on it. That should not have a lot of dust on it. A few dust specks aren't going to hurt anything, but it should not have, like, a lot of dust. It definitely shouldn't have, like, fingerprints or anything like that. I've never seen one of these have fingerprints from the factory or anything, so that means that it's been taken apart, which, you know, could be a bad thing. So, you know, yeah, it should be, you know, nice and clean on the inside. Yeah, same thing on that primary mirror. Make sure it doesn't have like any of that pitting, like those little black marks to where the coatings are failing. You probably would want to stay away from that. And the newer, you know, SCT really shouldn't, you know, have that. Okay, so we talked about the optics. So, you know, mount wise, you know, obviously this is a go-to mount. So, having a tough time putting this cover back on one-handed. There we go. Okay, so mount-wise, you know, unless you happen to, you know, get the owner to, like, show this thing to you under the night sky, and, you know, you could go through the alignment procedure, you really can't test it. What I usually do is I just, you know, I just make sure, you know, I'll run the motors, right? I'm kind of not talking so you can hear them run. You hear how that's like nice and smooth? There isn't like any like grinding sounds. There isn't any like weirdness going on. The telescope is not like, you know, like all jumpy, you know, as it's moving. You know, it's just moving in a nice smooth motion. So you check that axis. Check this axis. A lot of times if the motors are running fine like this, chances are probably you're good on the mount. You know, like, you know, obviously ask the owner if they've had any issues with the go-to system. You know, beyond, you know, what I just showed you, you really can't test it unless you're out under the night sky. And chances are you're probably not going to be. So that's the best you could do. You know, that's usually what I do. I've never really had any issues. Usually works just fine, you know, if I, you know, do this and it works. If it's, you know, making weird noises, you know, like sounds like the gears are grinding or something like that. You know, if it's, oh, the other thing to check too is, you know, like kind of, you know, try to like move it to like wiggle it around, I guess. It shouldn't really have any play in it. Yeah, if it has any of that, unless you're on, you know, like a scope expert or know somebody that is, you have, you know, like your club has a telescope type of workshop, I really would probably stay away. All right, moving on to GM mounts. You know, these guys pretty similar to what I just showed you with the Nexstar mount. Usually I'll just run the motors, you know, like you see if, you know, like they move smoothly, no weird noises or anything like that. That then, you know, like one thing that I will kind of point out more with this, you know, because that doesn't really have clutches. If a telescope mount or telescope has clutches, usually I'll make sure that they, you know, like when you engage the clutches, do they actually hold, you know, like right now I'm trying to move it, right? And it won't move in either axis. So, you know, make sure that the clutches are in good shape because they, you know, they can get worn out or broken. So yeah, check that. Otherwise, yeah, GM mounts, I mean, they're pretty simple. There isn't really too much else. I mean, again, you know, just look at the physical shape of it. The other thing to check on a GM mount, if you are doing astrophotography, you could ask for the error graph and see if the, you know, like previous owner had an error graph, you know, like of the tracking error, I mean. You know, if they do astrophotography, maybe they did. Like, honestly, I do a little bit of astrophotography. I don't have it for any of my mounts or anything like that, so they may or may not have that. But if you're doing, you know, astrophotography specifically, especially if it's a higher-end mount, that might be, you know, a good thing to ask for. Alright, so last but not least, refractors. So this one's kind of this is a special one for you guys. I actually recently just picked this up. I have not touched it from, you know, like when I bought it. I just, you know, I didn't really need another refractor, but, you know, one came up locally and it was a decent deal, and, you know, I actually wanted to try out one of these for a while. It's William Optics. So I just wanted to show you guys, you know, like what you might expect to find, and, you know, things that I kind of saw with this particular one that I liked and things that I did not like. So let's take a look. Okay. First off, let me kind of get this closer. You see all that on there? I mean, the case is pretty darn dirty on this thing. So, you know, that could mean a couple of things. Like in this case, the scope just sat around in the garage for a while. It just wasn't really used. But overall, you know, like if somebody's selling a premium piece of equipment and they don't bother to wipe down the case or they don't bother to maintain it, that's probably not a good sign. So, you know, like, you know, that's, to me, like if I showed up, you know, like looking at this and I didn't know a lot about telescopes, which, you know, I do, but if I didn't know, like this would not be a good start, you know. Okay, but let's, you know, pop the case open and let's take a look at how this guy looks like inside. Okay, so there's a scope. You know, inside the case, there's no like cobwebs. It's obviously not been wet or anything like that, so that's a good sign. Just kind of looking over the scope. You know, like you know, to me, refractors, I kind of do care more about their condition than other scopes and SCTs to a certain extent. You know, paint on this looks really nice. Let's kind of, you know, take this out real quick. And actually, let me reposition the camera here. I can't do this one-handed. Alright, so taking it out. So the first thing, you know, like when I took this out, you know, when I was looking at it, picked it up, kind of, you know, take a look at it. I mean, overall, like, there's no, like, scratches, like, dents definitely on the OTA that I could see, so that's really nice. One thing that was kind of a red flag to me, like, you see this dew shield, like, it should be fully screwed in, and it's not. So, like, this ring was really loose. I think I actually screwed it in a little bit, but it was, like, totally loose. So I'm not really sure what the deal is with that. The reason I kind of point that out, you know, refractors, they can be out of collimation, and you never know that, so maybe somebody was trying to take this off to, like, maybe mess with the collimation, you know, I don't know, but, like, you know, if I saw that, like, you know, I'd definitely ask the owner, like, you know, what was going on with that, just, you know, kind of weird. Optics on this are very nice. There's no, you know, scratches or anything like that. I mean, they're a little dirty, but it's nothing that you can't clean off. Okay, with refractors, so their dew shield does slide back and forth. And sometimes, you know, they'll be like really loose. So like, you know, if the scope is pointed up, like, you know, it'll just kind of slide down on its own. So, you know, check for that. It's not too big of a deal to fix that if that's going on. You just kind of need to change the felt that's in here. But, you know, that's something that you really shouldn't have to do. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and tighten this thing and back up here. Alright, so yeah, I went ahead and tightened that back up. You know, you do have to have rings, you have to have a dovetail to mount it on, you know, like on a GM mount. So yeah, so besides that, you know, check the focuser, make sure that that's smooth, like this one's very nice. And yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, with the refractors, you know, check the exterior condition, make sure that the optics are not scratched. The primary thing, the biggest thing that I usually check with refractors is to make sure that the optics are not scratched, so that, I kind of mentioned collimation earlier. Even if it is, you know, does happen to be out of collimation, which is pretty rare on refractors, you can, you know, they can be collimated, but usually it is a trip back to the factory. You're probably not going to collimate itself. So anyhow, so that's kind of what you check out with refractors. Alright guys, so hopefully you guys found those tips helpful. You know, overall, I'd say, you know, just use your kind of like gut instinct, you know, when dealing with the used stuff, you know, astronomy stuff, just in general. I mean, whether you're dealing with somebody in person or online, you know, if something just kind of sounds off, you know, just pass on the deal. You know, there's really no reason to risk it. And overall, you know, if you're just kind of not comfortable with buying used, you know, like just buy new. You know, I mean, yeah, it's cheaper. It's a little bit cheaper to buy. You know, used, but you know, you do get a, you know, usually manufacturer warranty, and you know, you're probably pretty sure that the stuff's gonna work. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, comments, or anything like that, please leave them in the thing below. If you guys have any questions, just, you know, you're looking at a piece of equipment, you want an opinion on it, you know, feel free to, you know, leave it in the link below or in the thing below. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing and hit that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.